He was just a dad trying to keep his little girl warm for one more night, but when the security guard told them they couldn't sleep in the bus station, everyone looked away, except for the quiet man in the corner, who got up, walked over, and offered them a key that would unlock a life he never dreamed was possible. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching? From the cold of the bus station was a physical thing, a presence that seeped through the worn soles of Liam's boots and settled deep in his bones. It was a damp cold mixed with the sterile scent of bleach and the faint lingering smell of exhaust fumes and forgotten journeys. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed a relentless monotone buzz, casting a pale, sterile glow over the rows of hard plastic chairs and the scuffed linoleum floor. It was just after 2 a.m., and the station was a ghost town, a purgatory for the transient and the close. Stranded. Liam sat on one of the unforgiving chairs, his arm wrapped tightly around his daughter Maya. She was asleep, her small body curled into his side, her head resting on his shoulder, her breath a soft, warm puff against his neck. She was 7 years old, and she deserved a bed with clean sheets and a room with a nightlight that chased away the shadows. Not this cold, impersonal limbo where every stranger's glance felt like an accusation. He pulled his thin jacket tighter around her, trying to shield her from a chill that was more than just the temperature. It was the chill of failure, of hitting a bottom he never thought existed. They'd been in the minivan for 3 weeks after the eviction notice became a reality. The last of his savings had evaporated into gas station, coffee, and cheap motel rooms that cost more than they were worth, until finally there was nothing left. The van had given up 2 days ago, coughing its last breath in a parking lot 3 blocks from here. Selling it for scrap had given them enough for a few meals and 2 bus tickets to a city he'd never been, to a place where a friend of a friend had promised there might be work as a carpenter, a trade his father had taught him, a skill that used to bring him pride and a steady paycheck. Now it just felt like a memory from another man's life. Maya stirred in her sleep, a soft whimper escaping her lips. He stroked her hair gently, whispering into her ear, "It's okay, sweet pea. Daddy's here." He wasn't sure who he was trying to convince her, or himself. He looked around the station again. A handful of other souls were scattered throughout, sleeping fitfully on benches, their belongings clutched to their chests. One old woman was muttering to herself near the vending machines across the room. A man sat alone, reading a thick paperback book under the harsh light. He was dressed simply in a dark coat and jeans. Nothing that stood out yet. He seemed different, calmer, more anchored than anyone else in this place. His stillness was a stark contrast to the restless energy that pulsed through Liam's own veins. The man looked up for a moment. Their eyes met briefly across the empty space. There was no pity in his gaze, no judgment, just a quiet observation that made Liam look away. First, his jaw tightened. He wasn't a charity case. He was a father doing what he had to do, but the shame was a bitter taste in his mouth. A constant companion in these long, dark hours. He just needed to make it to morning, just until the first bus left at 6 a.m., then they could start again. He just needed to keep her warm. Until then, he closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the cold wall, and listened to the hum of the lights, praying for the sun to rise. The security guard's voice was as sharp and unforgiving as the fluorescent lights overhead, cutting through the quiet hum of the station, with a tone that left no room for negotiation. "You can't sleep here." Liam's eyes snapped open. He hadn't realized he'd drifted off his arm, was numb from where Maya was leaning on him, but he didn't dare move her. He looked up at the guard, a young man with a tired expression and a uniform that was a size too big, trying to project an authority he probably didn't feel. Liam's heart began to pound, a slow, heavy thud against his ribs. "We're not sleeping," he said, his voice raspy with fatigue. "We're just waiting for the first bus 6 a.m." The guard's gaze flickered to Maya, then back to Liam. His expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. Rules are rules, sir. No loitering after midnight. You've been here for hours. I've got to ask you to move along. Move along where? The words caught in Liam's throat. He had nowhere else to go. The $27 folded in his pocket was for their tickets, and maybe a small breakfast. He couldn't spend it on another motel room, not even if he could find one this late. Swallowed. The pride that was threatening to choke him. Look, my daughter, she's just a kid. She's exhausted. Can't we just sit here? Quietly until the ticket counter opens. He hated the pleading tone in his own voice. The desperation he'd sworn he'd never show, but Maya's warmth against his side was the only thing that mattered right now. I'm sorry, the guard said. And for? The first time he sounded it. But my boss does sweeps. If he sees you, he'll call the cops, and you don't want that, not with a little one. Liam's blood ran cold, the thought of someone in a uniform questioning him about his ability to care. For Maya was his deepest fear. It was the nightmare that kept him awake long after she had fallen asleep. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Okay, we'll go. A few other people in the station glanced over there, faces a mixture. Kind of sympathy and relief. That it wasn't them, they quickly looked away, not wanting to get involved. Liam didn't blame them in a world like this. Minding your own business was a survival tactic. He gently shook Maya's shoulder. Sweet pea, wake up. We've got to take a little walk, she groaned, stirring her eyes fluttering open. But it's cold, Daddy. Her voice was small, fragile, and it shattered what was left of his composure. He forced a smile. I know, but we'll find somewhere warmer. Come. On. As he stood helping her to her feet, a voice from across the room spoke calm and steady. Excuse me. Liam turned startled. The man with the paperback book was standing. Now he'd closed the book, his finger still marking his page. He walked toward them, his steps measured and quiet. He wasn't tall or imposing, but he had a presence, a stillness, that commanded attention without demanding it. He stopped a few feet away, addressing the guard, but his eyes were on. Liam, is there a problem here? The guard shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Just doing my job, sir. No one's allowed to stay in the station overnight. The man nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving Liam's. I understand, but it's freezing outside. And this man is just trying to keep his daughter safe. There has to be some flexibility. The guard shook his head. I can't risk my job. Before Liam could say anything, the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a %. Small, sleek wallet. He didn't flash it. He opened it discreetly, and from it, he took a single key card, the kind used for modern hotels. He held it out to Liam. I have a room at the hotel across the street, he said, his voice low. 2 beds. I only need one. I prepaid for the week, and I'd hate for it to go to waste. Please take it. Get her somewhere warm. Liam stared at the key card, like it was a foreign object. His first instinct was to refuse to say no thanks. We're fine. But he wasn't fine. And Maya was shivering beside him, her small hand clutching his tightly. He was out of options, out of time, and out of pride. The key card felt unnaturally heavy in Liam's hand, its smooth plastic edges a stark contrast to his own calloused fingers. He stared at it, then up at the man whose face was calm and unreadable in the harsh light of the station. I can't take this, Liam said the words. Automatic, a reflex, born of pride and a lifetime of self-reliance. We don't take charity. The man's expression didn't change. He didn't look offended or surprised. He simply met Liam's gaze with a steady, unwavering calm. It's not charity, he said, his voice even. It's a resource going to waste. I'm in town for a conference that was half canceled. They wouldn't refund the room. So it's an empty bed. Think of it as just that, an empty bed that your daughter can use to get a full night's sleep. He wasn't pushy. He wasn't condescending. He was just reasonable. And that made it harder for Liam to refuse. Maya tugged on his sleeve, her eyes wide with a mixture of weariness and hope. "Daddy, please can we go to the hotel? It has soft beds, I bet." Her small voice cut through the thick armor of his pride. He looked down at her tired face, and the faint blue tint under her eyes from exhaustion in that moment. Nothing else mattered. Not his pride, not his fear of being indebted to a stranger, not the voice in his head screaming that this was a mistake. He let out a slow breath that felt like a surrender. He looked back at the man and gave a single sharp nod. "Okay," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "For her, thank you." The man gave a small nod in return. "My name is Arthur, by the way." "Liam," he replied, shaking the offered hand. Arthur's grip was firm, confident. "It's nice to meet you, Liam." The security guard stood by, watching the exchange with a look of quiet relief. He gave Liam a small apologetic shrug, as if to say, "Thanks for not making this harder." Arthur gestured toward the exit. "The Grand Vista. It's just across the square, you can't miss it. Room 402. The key is already activated. You don't need to check in." Liam hesitated. "What about you?" Arthur smiled faintly. "I'll be along later. I've got a few more chapters to get through. Don't worry about me." With that, he turned and walked back to his chair, picking up his book as if he'd just finished a casual conversation about the weather. Liam watched him for a moment longer, trying to understand what had just happened. A stranger with kind eyes and a prepaid hotel room had just handed him a lifeline without asking for a single thing. In return, he took Maya's hand, her small fingers wrapping around his with a renewed warmth, and led her out of the cold station and into the even colder night. The wind bit at their faces as they crossed the deserted square. But for the first time in a long time, Liam felt a flicker of something he hadn't dared to feel in months. Hope. It was terrifying. The lobby of the Grand Vista was an assault on the senses. After the stark cold of the bus station, a wave of warm air, scented with something clean and vaguely floral, washed over them as the automatic doors slid open. The floors were polished marble, reflecting the soft golden light from recessed fixtures on the ceiling. A grand staircase curved elegantly upward, and quiet instrumental music played from invisible speakers. Liam felt instantly out of place. His worn boots scuffed against the pristine floor, and his jacket, still damp from the night air, felt like a mark of his otherness. He tightened his grip on Maya's hand, half expecting a well-dressed clerk to appear from behind the gleaming front desk and ask them to leave. But the lobby was empty, save for a lone bellhop dozing in a plush armchair near the elevators. Maya's eyes were wide with awe. She spun around slowly, taking in the towering Christmas tree adorned with glittering ornaments and white lights. "Daddy, is this a castle?" she whispered. Liam managed a small smile. "Close enough for tonight, sweetheart." He led her toward the elevators. His heart still pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs, he kept the Reibstradar Elevator keycard clutched in his hand, like a talisman, praying it would work. Praying this wasn't some elaborate, cruel joke. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent and smooth, a world away from the rattling shudder of the city buses he was used to when the doors opened onto a softly lit hallway, carpeted in a thick plush material that muffled their footsteps. Liam felt a sense of surreal disbelief. He followed the numbers on the wall until they reached 402. His hand trembled slightly. As he held the keycard up to the sensor, there was a soft click, and a green light blinked once he pushed the door open. And the warmth inside was immediate, and enveloping the room was spacious and clean, dominated by 2 large, queen-sized beds with crisp, white duvets, and a mountain of pillows. A flat-screen television was mounted on the wall opposite them, and a small desk sat tucked into the corner near a window that offered a sweeping view of the city's twinkling lights. Maya let go of his hand and ran straight to the nearest bed, flopping onto it with a squeal of pure delight. "It's so soft, Daddy. It's like a cloud," she giggled, rolling around and burying her face in the pillows. Liam stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her, a lump forming in his throat. It was just a hotel room, a temporary space that didn't belong to them, but seeing the unadulterated joy on his daughter's face felt like a balm on a wound he didn't know was still so raw. He closed the door behind him, the lock clicking shut with a finality that sealed them. In this temporary sanctuary, he walked over to the bed and sat on the edge, his shoulders finally slumping as the tension of the last 48 hours began to recede. He didn't know who Arthur was, or why he had done this. But for tonight, for this one night, his daughter was safe, warm, and sleeping on a cloud, and that was more than enough. Liam woke to the soft gray light of dawn, filtering through the gap in the hotel room curtains. For a moment he was disoriented. The unfamiliar softness of the mattress and the quiet hum of the room's heating unit, a stark contrast to the lumpy back seat of the van, or the cold hard bench of the bus station. Then the memory of the night before flooded back. Arthur, the keycard, the look of pure joy on Maya's face. As she dove into the bed, he sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and looked over at the other bed. Maya was still sound asleep, a small lump under the massive duvet. Only the top of her messy brown hair visible. He smiled, a real genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in what felt like an eternity. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and walked to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain to look out. At the city below, the world was waking up, headlights tracing patterns on the wet streets below, and smoke curling from distant chimneys. He felt a strange sense of detachment, watching it all from 4 floors up like he was a ghost. Observing a world he was no longer a part of. A soft knock on the door made him jump, his heart leaping into his throat. His first thought was that it was hotel security coming to tell them there had been a mistake, that they didn't belong. Here he moved to the door, slowly, and peered through the peephole. It was Arthur. He was holding a cardboard coffee tray and a small white paper bag. Liam hesitated for a second, then unlocked the door. Arthur stood there, in the same simple, dark coat, a faint smile on his face. "Morning," he said softly. "I figured you two might be hungry. I hope you don't mind." Liam stepped aside, letting him in. "No, not at all. Thank you," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "You really didn't have to do this?" Arthur set the bag and the coffee on the small desk. "I wanted to. I remember what it's like to wake up in a new city with no idea where to get a decent cup of coffee." He handed Liam one of the steaming cups. It was warm in his hands, a small, simple comfort that felt monumental. Liam took a sip. The coffee was rich and strong, a world away from the bitter instant stuff he'd been drinking for weeks. "This is good," he said gratefully. Arthur nodded, gesturing to the bag. "Donuts for the co-pilot," he said with a wink toward Maya's sleeping form. "I wasn't sure what she liked, so I got a mix." Liam looked at this man, this stranger who had not only given them a safe place to sleep, but had also shown up with breakfast without any expectation of repayment. It was a kindness so profound, it felt foreign, almost suspicious. "Why are you doing this?" Liam asked the question, blunt but honest. Arthur didn't seem surprised by it. He took a plated sip of his own coffee and leaned against the wall, his gaze thoughtful. "Because my father once told me that the measure of a man isn't what he has, it's what he does when he sees someone else with nothing." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I saw a good father trying to protect his daughter, and it reminded me of him, that's all." Liam didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and took another sip of coffee. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was filled with a quiet, unspoken understanding. And as the city outside came to life, Liam felt the hard knot of fear in his chest loosen just a little. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't completely alone. The donuts were a hit. Maya woke up about an hour later, and her eyes went wide at the sight of the white paper bag on the desk. She devoured a chocolate-frosted one with sprinkles, her cheeks dusted with sugar and her spirits visibly lifted by the simple, unexpected treat. She chattered away between bites, telling Arthur all about her favorite dinosaur, a triceratops named Spike, and her dream of one day having a dog named Waffles. Arthur listened intently, nodding and asking questions like her opinions were the most important thing in the world. Liam watched them from the chair by the window, a quiet observer of this strange new dynamic. He was still wary, still on guard, but it was hard to maintain his defenses. When his daughter was laughing so freely and the man who had made it possible seemed to have no agenda other than simple human decency after breakfast, Arthur stood to leave. "Well, I have a few calls to make," he said, buttoning his coat, "but I was thinking, if you don't have any plans, I have a proposition for you." Liam's brow furrowed. "A proposition?" "It's nothing complicated," Arthur said quickly, as if sensing his hesitation. "I have a storage unit a few miles from here. It's a bit of a mess, and I need some sturdy shelves built. I'm not much of a handyman myself, and I was going to hire someone anyway. I saw your hands last night. You look like a man who knows his way around a toolkit." Liam looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred from years of working with wood. It was true, he was a carpenter by trade, a damn good one, before his business went under. "I'd pay you for your time, of course. Fair wage, materials all covered." Liam hesitated. The offer was a lifeline, a way to earn some money with dignity, instead of accepting another handout. But it also meant extending his connection to this mysterious man. It meant trusting him a little more. "I don't know," Liam said honestly. Arthur didn't push. "Think about it," he said, heading for the door. "The room is yours for the rest of the week, regardless. So you have time. If you decide you're interested, just text me." He pulled a pen from his pocket and scribbled a number on a hotel napkin. "In the meantime, get some rest. You both look like you need it." With a final nod, he was gone, leaving Liam alone with the scent of coffee and donuts and an offer that felt too good to be true. He looked at the napkin with the phone number on it, then at Maya, who was now carefully arranging the leftover donuts into a smiley face on her plate. "I like him, Daddy," she said without looking up. "He has kind eyes." Liam stared at the number again, his mind racing. He could say no. He could take their bus tickets and leave tomorrow, as planned, disappear into a new city and a new life, and never see Arthur again. Or he could take a chance. A risk on a stranger's kindness, and see where it led. He didn't know which path was safer, but he knew which one felt like a beginning. For 2 days, Liam didn't call. He and Maya existed in the strange, peaceful bubble of the hotel room. They slept late, watched cartoons, and ventured out only for short walks around the city square. Maya was fascinated by the fountains and the statues. And for a little while, Liam could almost pretend they were just tourists on a vacation, not refugees, from a life that had fallen apart. But the reality of their situation was always there, a quiet hum beneath the surface. The wired $27 in his wallet hadn't grown, and the bus tickets were a constant reminder that this sanctuary was temporary. On the third morning, Liam woke up before dawn and stood by the window watching the city sleep. He knew he couldn't stall any longer. He had to make a decision. He looked at the napkin on the desk, Arthur's number scrawled in confident ink. He thought about what the man had said. "I saw a good father trying to protect his daughter." It wasn't pity, it was respect, and that distinction made all the difference. He picked up his phone and typed out a simple message. "I'm in. When do we start?" The reply came almost instantly. "Glad to hear it. How about 10 a.m.? I'll pick you up, Liam." Spent the next few hours feeling a nervous energy he hadn't felt in months. He showered, shaved, and put on his cleanest work shirt. It was still frayed at the collar, but it felt better than the wrinkled clothes he'd been living in. He explained the plan to Maya, who was thrilled at the prospect of a new adventure. "Are we going to build something, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes shining. "Yeah, sweet pea we are," At exactly 10 a sleek black car pulled up in front of the hotel. It wasn't flashy, but it was clearly expensive and out of place. In Liam's world, Arthur stepped out of the driver's side, wearing the same simple coat. He looked at Liam's work boots and the determined set of his jaw, and nodded in. Approval ready, Liam nodded back. Let's do this. The storage facility was a clean, modern place on the outskirts of the city, a labyrinth of identical roll-up doors. Arthur led him to a unit at the end of a long hallway, and unlocked it. Inside were stacks of boxes filled with books, furniture, and other personal effects, all neatly packed but disorganized. "This is it," Arthur said, gesturing to the cluttered space. "I need shelves along that back wall sturdy enough to hold these books." He handed Liam a prepaid debit card. "This is for materials. There's a hardware store just down the road. Get whatever you need, and keep the receipts." Liam took the card, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was something he knew how to do. This was his element. "I'll get started right away," he said. Arthur smiled. "I have no doubt. And while you're working, I thought I might take Maya to the park across the park street, if that's all right. With you there's a playground and a duck pond." Liam hesitated for a second. The thought of letting Maya out of his sight, with a man he barely knew, sent a jolt of anxiety through him. But then he looked at Arthur's calm, steady face, and Maya's hopeful expression. And he knew he had to trust someone. Eventually. "Okay," he said. "But you have her back in 2 hours. Deal," Arthur said with a smile. "Come on, Maya. Let's go see if the ducks are hungry." Liam worked with a focused intensity that had been dormant for too long. The scent of sawdust and the feel of a hammer in his hand were as familiar to him as his own reflection. He measured and cut with precision, his movements fluid, efficient, born of years of practice. For the first time in months, he wasn't just surviving, he was creating, building something solid and real with his own 2 hands. He lost track of time, absorbed in the rhythm of the work. The world outside the storage unit faded away, replaced by the simple, satisfying logic of angles and joints and the clean lines of finished wood. True to his word, Arthur returned with Maya exactly 2 hours later. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her hair was windswept. She was holding a half-eaten bag of popcorn and chattering excitedly about the ducks she had named. "Daddy, Mr. Art bought me popcorn, and we saw a duck named George, who was very bossy," she said, rushing into Liam's arms. Liam laughed, hugging her tight. "It sounds like you had fun." "We did," she said, beaming. "Mr. Art is a very good listener." Arthur stood in the doorway, watching them, a quiet smile on his face. He looked at the partially constructed shelves, and his eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "Wow, Liam, you're fast." Liam shrugged. "I told you I knew my way around a toolkit." He wiped the sawdust from his hands and looked at his work with a flicker of pride. "It'll be done by tomorrow afternoon." Arthur nodded, clearly impressed. "I can see that," he then turned to Maya. "Well, I think your dad has earned a good dinner tonight. What do you say? We order a pizza." Maya's eyes lit up. "Can we get pepperoni?" "We can get whatever you want," Arthur said. And in that moment, sitting on the cold concrete floor of a storage unit surrounded by sawdust and the smell of pizza, Liam felt a sense of normalcy. He thought he had lost forever. He didn't know what the future held or who this mysterious man really was, but for the first time in a day-mated, long time, he was willing to find out. The next day unfolded in a similar rhythm of quiet work and easy companionship. Liam finished the shelves, sanding the edges until they were smooth, and reinforcing the joints until he was satisfied they could hold twice the weight of the books they were intended for. They were more than just shelves. They were a testament to his skill, a piece of himself he hadn't seen in a long time. Arthur stopped by in the afternoon, not to check on his progress, but just to sit and talk. He brought coffee and asked Liam about his life. Before all this, Liam found himself opening up, telling him about the small carpentry business he'd built from scratch, the custom furniture he used to make, and the way his wife Sarah had always been his biggest supporter. He talked about her illness, the medical bills that piled up like snowdrifts, and the slow, painful process of losing everything he'd worked for. Arthur listened without interruption, his expression a mixture of empathy and respect. He didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions, he just listened. And that was more than anyone had done in years when the shelves were finally finished. Liam stood back and looked at them with a deep sense of satisfaction. They were strong, functional, and built to last. Arthur ran a hand along the smooth wood, his appreciation genuine. "Liam, this is incredible work," he said. "It's more than I expected." He handed Liam an envelope, "Your payment." Liam took it but didn't open it. "Thank you," he said, "for the work, for the trust." "You earned it," Arthur replied, as they packed up to leave. A thought struck Liam. "What are you going to do with all these books?" Arthur paused for a moment, a shadow passing over his face. "I'm not sure yet," he said quietly. "They belong to my father. He was a great reader. He always said books were a way to live 1,000 lives." There was a sadness in his voice that Liam hadn't heard before, a hint of a deeper story he wasn't ready to tell. They drove back to the hotel in comfortable silence. When they pulled up to the entrance, Liam turned to Arthur. "I know the week is almost up and we've got to figure out our next move, but I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done. You didn't have to help us, but you did, and I won't forget it." Arthur met his gaze, his eyes holding a warmth that seemed to come from a place of deep sincerity. "It was my pleasure, Liam," he said. "But this doesn't have to be the end of it." Liam frowned. "What do you mean?" "I have another project in mind," Arthur said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Something a little bigger than shelves, and I could use a good carpenter." The offer hung in the air between them, a question and a promise, and Liam knew that his life was about to change in a way he could never have imagined. Liam hesitated, his hand on the car door handle. A bigger project. What kind of project? Arthur's gaze was steady, his calm demeanor unwavering for a man who seemed to materialize out of thin air and solve problems with quiet efficiency. He was surprisingly difficult to read. "It's a community center," he said finally, "an old building downtown that's been sitting empty for years. I bought it a while ago with the intention of renovating it, a place for after-school programs, skills training, a small library. Maybe I've had the plans drawn up, but I haven't found the right person to lead the construction, the right foreman." He looked directly at Liam. "Someone who doesn't just see blueprints, but sees the purpose behind them, someone who builds with care." Liam was speechless. A community center, a foreman's job. It was the kind of opportunity he used to dream about before his world narrowed to the confines of a minivan, and the next meal he thought about the bus ticket still tucked in his wallet, a one-way path to an uncertain future with a friend of a friend who might have work. This was different. This was a chance to plant roots, to build something meaningful, not just for a community, but for himself and for Maya. "Why me?" Liam asked, his voice barely audible. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're a skilled craftsman," Arthur said. "I know you're a devoted father, and I know you have an integrity that can't be bought. I saw it in the way you tried to refuse my help, even when you desperately needed it. That's the kind of man I want running this project." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. Liam had spent so long being judged for what he lacked that he had forgotten what it felt like to be seen for what he had to offer. He looked over at Maya in the back seat, humming to herself, as she colored in a worn-out activity book. This wasn't just about him, it was about giving her a stable home, a place to belong. "I don't have a crew or tools anymore," Liam said, the practicalities of his situation crashing back in. "I'll provide everything you need, a budget for materials, a workshop space, Even a small apartment nearby for you and Maya to live in while the project is underway. Arthur had thought of everything. It was almost too perfect, too easy, which sent a fresh wave of suspicion through Liam. This is a huge investment, he said. What's in it for you? Why are you doing all this? Arthur was silent for a long moment, his eyes drifting to the city skyline beyond the hotel. He let out a slow breath. Because I made a promise to my father before he passed away, he said, his voice laced with a quiet grief. I promised him I would do something that mattered, something more than just making money. I've been looking for the right project for a long time, and I think I just found it. And the right person to help me build it. The vulnerability in that admission was the final piece that broke through Liam's defenses. This wasn't about charity. This was about two men trying to honor a legacy, his and Arthur's. He met Arthur's gaze, and for the first time without hesitation he said, I'll do it. The transition from the sterile quiet of the hotel to the dusty potential of the apartment was a seismic shift in their small world. The apartment was on the second floor of a brick building, just a few blocks from the future community center. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, spacious, and filled with light. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It had 2 bedrooms, a small but functional kitchen, and most importantly, it was theirs. At least for now. The moment they walked in, Maya dropped her small backpack and ran through the empty rooms, her laughter echoing off the hardwood floors. "Daddy, we have a real house!" she yelled, her voice filled with pure, unadulterated joy. Liam leaned against the doorframe, watching her, a feeling of overwhelming gratitude washing over him. He hadn't realized how heavy the burden of their homelessness had been until this moment, when the weight finally lifted. Arthur had arranged for some basic furniture to be delivered: a couch, 2 beds, a small kitchen table. They were simple pieces, but to Liam they felt like a king's ransom. He spent the first day just settling in, unpacking their few belongings, and arranging them with care. He placed Maya's drawings on the fridge, her stuffed animals on her new bed, and his worn-out toolkit, the only remnant of his old life, on a shelf in the closet that night. They ate dinner at their new table. Simple macaroni and cheese from a box, but it tasted like a feast. Maya couldn't stop smiling, her feet swinging happily beneath her chair. "Can we stay here forever, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. Liam's heart ached with the baiter. Same question. He couldn't make that promise, not yet. But for the first time in a long time, the word forever didn't seem like an impossible fantasy. "We'll see, sweetheart," he said, ruffling her hair. "For now, let's just enjoy having a home." Later that night, after Maya was asleep, Liam stood by the window looking out at the quiet street below the city. Lights twinkled in the distance, a constant reminder of the world he had felt so disconnected from. He thought about Arthur, the man who had orchestrated this incredible turn of events. He still knew so little about him. He was a man of quiet means and deep convictions, but the source of his wealth and the full story of his past remained a mystery. Liam knew he was taking a huge risk, placing his trust in this stranger. But as he looked around the small apartment filled with the quiet warmth of a home, he knew he had made the right choice. This wasn't just a job. It was a new beginning, and he was ready to build it from the ground up, one day at a time. The community center was a beautiful old ghost of a building, a 2-story brick structure with arched windows and intricate stone carvings that hinted at a grander past. It had been a public library once, then a post office, and finally, it had been left to decay, a forgotten relic in the heart of the city. The first time Liam walked through its doors, the air was thick with the smell of dust and dampness. Sunlight streamed through grimy windows, illuminating peeling paint, floors littered with debris, but where others saw ruin, Liam saw potential. He ran his hand along a solid oak banister, marveling at the craftsmanship. He saw the strong bones of the building, the good wood, the elegant lines that had been obscured by years of neglect. This wasn't a teardown, it was a restoration, resurrection. Arthur met him there the next morning. Armed with a set of rolled-up blueprints, he spread them out on a makeshift table, a large piece of plywood balanced on two sawhorses. "This is the vision," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. The plans were ambitious but thoughtful, an open concept. Ground floor with a library nook, a small stage and a communal kitchen. The second floor was designed as a series of classrooms and a workshop for skills. Training, it's a lot of work, Liam said, studying the plans, his mind already calculating timelines and materials. "I know," Arthur replied, "but I have faith in you." Over the next few weeks, the building came, alive with the sounds of progress. Liam hired a small crew of local workers, men who were grateful for the steady paycheck and the chance to be part of something meaningful. They gutted the interior, carefully preserving the original architectural details while modernizing the infrastructure. The building became Liam's sanctuary. He was the first to arrive each morning and the last to leave. He poured all of his skill, his passion, his very soul into the project. This wasn't just a job, it was his redemption. Arthur was a constant presence, not as a boss, but as a partner. He'd show up with coffee and donuts in the morning and walk through the site, with Liam discussing progress and brainstorming solutions. He never interfered, he trusted Liam's expertise implicitly. Maya often came to the site after school. She'd sit in a safe corner with her coloring books. Her small presence, a bright spot of color in the dusty landscape. She loved watching her father work, seeing him in his element. Confident and capable, Daddy's building a castle for the whole town. She'd tell the workers, who all adored her. One afternoon, as Liam was framing a new wall, Arthur stood beside him, watching with a thoughtful expression. "You're happy here, aren't you?" he asked. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Liam didn't stop working, but a smile touched his lips. "Yeah," he said. "I am. I haven't felt this much like myself in a long time," he said. Looked at Arthur, his gratitude too deep for words. "I owe you everything." Arthur shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Liam, we're building this together." But as the project progressed and their friendship deepened, the mystery of Arthur's past lingered. Liam still didn't know where he came from or what he did when he wasn't at the community center. He was a man of contradictions, simple in his tastes, yet surrounded by an aura of quiet wealth and influence. And Liam couldn't shake the feeling that there was a whole other side to Arthur that he had yet to see. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Maya was sitting at a makeshift desk in the site's temporary office, doing her homework, while Liam consulted blueprints with his small crew. Arthur had stopped by earlier with a box of pastries and was now in a corner on his phone, his voice low and serious. It was a side of him Liam rarely saw, the one that spoke with a clipped authority that hinted at a world of high-stakes decisions and corporate negotiations. Liam tried not to listen, but a few phrases drifted across the cavernous space. "No, the deal is non-negotiable," and "the portfolio can't sustain that kind of risk," and "tell the board, I'll handle it." Liam's brow furrowed. Portfolio board, these weren't the words of a man with just a bit of family money. This was the language of serious finance, of corporate power. He glanced at Arthur, who now had his back to the room, his posture tense. When the call ended, Arthur turned around. His expression was once again calm and composed. But Liam had seen the mask slip just for a second later that day. Maya was using Arthur's tablet to watch a cartoon he'd downloaded for her. Liam was nearby, sanding a piece of reclaimed oak, when Maya called out, "Daddy, look, it's Mr. Art." Liam walked over, expecting to see a photo Arthur had shown her, but instead she was pointing to a news article that had popped up on the side of the screen. The headline was bold and jarring. "Vance Capital CEO Arthur Vance finalizes landmark tech merger." Below it was a professional headshot of Arthur. He was wearing a tailored suit, his expression serious and commanding. It was the same man but a world away from the one who wore simple coats and brought donuts to a construction site. Liam stared at the screen, his heart sinking. Vance Capital, one of the largest and most influential investment firms in the country. He had seen the name in business journals and news reports, but he had never made the connection. Arthur Vance wasn't just a wealthy man with a good heart. He was a titan of industry, a billionaire investor whose decisions could shape markets. He was one of the most powerful men in the country. Maya looked up at him, her expression innocent and curious. "Why does he look so serious? Daddy, is he famous?" Liam couldn't speak. He felt a cold wave of understanding wash over him. The generous offer, the prepaid hotel room, the unlimited budget for the community center. It all made sense now, but it also felt like a lie of omission so profound. It called everything into question. He looked at Arthur, who was now walking toward them, a smile on his face that faded the moment he saw what was on the screen. His eyes met Liam's, and in that silent shared glance, the foundation of their fragile trust began to crack. The air in the half-finished community center suddenly felt thick and heavy, the scent of sawdust and fresh paint unable to mask the tension that had descended upon the room. Arthur stood frozen a few feet away, the calm facade he wore so effortlessly had shattered, leaving behind a man who looked vulnerable and exposed. For the first time, Liam saw not a friend but a stranger, a powerful man from a world he couldn't possibly comprehend. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and steady, but laced with a hurt. He couldn't hide Vance Capital. He said the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "You're Arthur Vance." Arthur didn't deny it. He just nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a regret that was almost painful to look at. "Yes." Liam let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "A billionaire investor. You neglected to mention that part?" He gestured around the cavernous space at the half-framed walls and stacks of lumber. "What is this to you, Arthur? Just some pet project, a tax write-off, a way for a man who has everything to feel good about himself." The words were sharper than he intended, but they came from a place of deep betrayal. "No, Liam, it's not like that," Arthur said, his voice earnest. "I never wanted this to be about my money. I wanted it to be about the work, about what we were building together." "What we were building," Liam countered, his voice rising. "Or what you were buying. You bought me a hotel room. You bought me a job. You bought me an apartment. This whole thing, this whole friendship. It's been a transaction, hasn't it?" "That's not true," Arthur insisted, stepping closer. "I saw something in you, Liam, an integrity, a skill that had nothing to do with money. I wanted to help you, but I knew your pride wouldn't let you accept a handout, so I created an opportunity." "You created a lie?" Liam shot back, the accusation hanging in the air. Between them, Maya had gone quiet. Sensing the shift in the room, she looked between the two men, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Liam's heart ached at the sight of her. He crouched down and pulled her into a hug. "It's okay, sweet pea," he whispered. But he knew it wasn't. He stood up, his resolve hardening. "I can't do this," he said, his voice flat. "I can't work for a man I don't trust." Please don't do this," Arthur pleaded, his voice cracking with an emotion Liam had never heard before. "Don't let my name ruin what we've built." But it was too late. The trust that had been so carefully constructed between them had been demolished in an instant. Liam looked at the beautiful building around him, a place that had felt like a symbol of his redemption. Now, it just felt like a monument to his own naivete. He took Maya's hand. "We're leaving," he said. Without looking back, he walked out of the community center, the place that had been his sanctuary, and back into the uncertain world he had tried so hard to escape. The sound of the heavy oak door closing behind him echoed like a final goodbye. Liam walked away from the community center with a cold, hollow feeling in the pit of his stomach. He didn't go back to the apartment. He couldn't, not yet. It felt tainted now, another gift from a man whose life was a lie. Instead, and Maya walked to a small park a few blocks away, a place with rusty swings and a sandbox filled with damp sand. He sat on a bench watching as Maya played, her usual joyful energy replaced by a quiet subduedness. She knew something was wrong. And his heart broke for her. All over again he had tried so hard to shield her from the harsh realities of the world, but now he had dragged her into a drama he didn't understand. He felt like a fool he had let himself believe in. Arthur's kindness had let himself hope for a future that was stable and secure. Now it all felt like an illusion, a carefully constructed fantasy designed by a man who could afford to play God with other people's lives. He replayed their conversations in his mind, searching for clues. He had missed the expensive car, the vague references to his work, the quiet authority he carried. It had all been there right in front of him, but he had been so desperate for a lifeline that he had willingly ignored the warning signs. The anger he felt was a hot, bitter thing, but underneath it was a deep and profound sadness. He hadn't just lost a job, he had lost a friend, or at least the man he thought was his friend. He had let someone into his life, into Maya's life. And now the inevitable fallout was coming that evening. He finally went back to the apartment. It felt empty. Colder than before, he packed their few belongings into a duffel bag, his movements stiff and mechanical. Maya watched him from the doorway, her favorite stuffed bear clutched to her chest. "Are we leaving again, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and trembling. Liam's resolve wavered. He knelt down in front of her and cupped her face in his hands. "Yeah, sweet pea," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "We have to. But I like it here," she whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I like our house, and I like Mr. Art." "I know, baby, I know," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. "But we can't stay. It's complicated." He didn't have a plan. He didn't know where they would go or what they would do. He had walked away from the only stable opportunity he'd had in years, all because of his pride. But it was more than that. It was about self-respect, about refusing to be a pawn in a rich man's game. He couldn't be a project. He had to be a partner, and the chasm between their two worlds felt too vast to bridge. He left the keys to the apartment on the project kitchen counter, along with the company credit card and the remaining cash from his last paycheck. He wouldn't take another dime from Arthur Vance. He walked out of the building with Maya's hand in his back, into the uncertainty of the night, not knowing that his departure would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The news of Liam's departure hit Arthur like a physical blow. He stood in the empty community center, the silence amplifying the echo of their last conversation. He had replayed it in his mind 100 times, searching for a different way. He could have handled it, a way to explain the truth without shattering the trust he had so carefully built. But there was no easy answer. He had lied by omission, and in Liam's world, that was a cardinal sin. He returned to his penthouse apartment, a place of cold glass and polished steel that had always felt more like a showroom than a home. The panoramic views of the city skyline, which used to fill him with a sense of power and accomplishment, now just made him feel isolated and alone. He had spent his life building an empire, a legacy of wealth and influence. But in the process, he had forgotten how to build genuine connections. He had seen in Liam a reflection of his own father, a man of integrity and quiet strength. And he had wanted to honor that legacy by giving Liam a hand up, not a handout. But he had been so afraid of his wealth becoming a barrier that he had inadvertently made it the very thing that drove them apart. His assistant, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, found him staring out the window, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. "The board is asking for an update on the community center project," she said, her voice professional but laced with a hint of concern. "They're worried about the delays." "Tell them the project is on hold," Arthur said without turning around. "What should I tell them is the reason?" she asked. "The foreman quit," he said, his voice flat. Evelyn was silent for a moment. Then she stepped closer. "This isn't just about a foreman, is it, Arthur?" He finally turned to face her, his expression weary and defeated. "I messed up, Evelyn," he said. "I found something real, something that mattered. And I ruined it because I didn't know how to be honest about who I am." "Then be honest now," she said simply. "It's never too late to tell the truth." Her words hung in the air. A simple, powerful challenge. Arthur looked at the whiskey in his hand, then set it down on the table untouched. He had spent his life making calculated decisions based on risk and reward, but this was different. This was about a man's dignity and a little girl's heart. He didn't know if he could fix what he had broken, but he knew he had to try. He couldn't let their story end in a half-finished building, filled with the ghosts of what might have been. The next few weeks were a blur of uncertainty for Liam and Maya. They stayed in a series of cheap motels, moving from one to the next as their meager funds dwindled. Liam picked up odd jobs where he could, a day of labor here, a small repair job there. But it wasn't enough to get them back on their feet. He sold his father's old watch, the last sentimental thing he owned, just to keep them fed. Maya was resilient as always, but Liam could see the toll their transient life was taking on her. She was quieter, more withdrawn, and she often asked about Arthur in a small, hopeful voice that broke Liam's heart. He didn't know what to tell her, so he just said, "He's busy, sweetheart," and changed the bright subject. One rainy afternoon they found themselves in a public library, seeking refuge from the cold. Liam was scanning the classifieds for any carpentry work when Maya came up to him holding a colorful children's book. "Daddy, can we read this one?" she asked. He took the book and smiled. It was about a lonely giant who befriends a small bird. As he read the story aloud, his voice soft in the quiet library, couldn't help but see the parallels to his own life. He was the giant, stubborn and proud, and Arthur was the bird who had tried to show him a different way of seeing the world. A world where kindness wasn't a weakness and trust wasn't a liability. After the story, Maya fell asleep in his lap, her head resting on his chest. He looked down at her peaceful face, and a wave of regret washed over him. He had let his pride and his fear dictate his actions, and in doing so, he had deprived his daughter of a stable home and a kind friend. He had been so focused on not being a charity case that he had failed to see that Arthur's offer was never about charity. It was about connection, about two lonely souls finding solace in each other's company. He knew he had to do something to fix this, not just for Maya, but for himself. He had to swallow his pride and reach out to Arthur. Not to ask for a handout, but to apologize for walking away, to admit that he had been wrong. He didn't know if Arthur would forgive him, but he had to try. He had to show his daughter that it was never too late to admit a mistake, and that true strength wasn't about never falling down, it was about having the courage to get back up again. The letter arrived at Arthur's office on a Monday morning. A simple white envelope with no return address tucked into a pile of corporate mail. Evelyn brought it to him, her expression curious. "This came for you, hand-delivered," she said. Arthur took it, his brow furrowed. He recognized the messy but familiar handwriting on the front. It was from Liam. His heart skipped a beat. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper folded in three. He bensingly anteceded, unfolded it, and read the short, handwritten note. "Arthur, I was wrong. I let my pride get in the way of seeing the truth. You were a good friend to me, and my daughter and I walked away because I was scared, not because I didn't trust you. I'm sorry for the way I left. If the offer to finish the community center is still on the table, I'd like to come back not as your employee, but as your partner. Let me know, Liam." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a crocodile's profound apology. Arthur read the letter 3 times, a feeling of immense relief washing over him. He had been racking his brain for weeks, trying to figure out how to reach out to Liam without overstepping his boundaries. This letter was the opening he had been hoping for. He looked up at Evelyn, a smile spreading across his face for the first time in weeks. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," he said. "I have somewhere I need to be." He didn't call or text. I knew this was a conversation that needed to happen in person. He drove to the last known address he had for Liam, a run-down motel on the edge of town. His heart pounded with a mixture of hope and trepidation. What if he was too late? What if Liam and Maya had already left? He found them in the small park across the street. Liam was pushing Maya on the swings, his expression weary but resolute. He looked up as Arthur approached, his eyes widening in surprise. Arthur stopped a few feet away, not wanting to crowd him. "I got your letter," he said, his voice soft. Liam nodded slowly. "I meant every word." "I know," Arthur said, "and I'm sorry too. I should have been honest with you from the beginning." He extended his hand. "The offer is still on the blank table, partner." Liam looked at his hand, then back at his face. He saw no pity, no condescension, just genuine sincerity. He took Arthur's hand and shook it firmly, a silent agreement passing between them. "Daddy," Maya called, out from the swing. "Is Mr. Art staying for dinner?" Arthur smiled at her. "I'd love to," he said, and as the three of them walked back to the motel together, the broken pieces of their friendship began to knit themselves back together, stronger and more honest than before. The return to the community center felt like a homecoming. The building welcomed them back with its familiar scent of sawdust and the quiet promise of what was to come. Liam walked through the space, his hand grazing the half-finished walls, a sense of purpose reigniting within him. This time it was different. He wasn't just a foreman, he was a partner. Arthur had drawn up a formal partnership agreement, giving Liam a stake in the project and full creative control. It was a gesture of trust, so profound, it left Liam speechless. They worked side by side every day, their collaboration seamless and intuitive. Liam's practical skills and craftsmanship complemented Arthur's vision and resources. They hired a larger crew, and the project moved forward at a rapid pace. The building transformed from a hollow shell into a vibrant hub of activity. The walls were painted, the floors were polished, and the custom-built shelves Liam had designed were filled with books donated by the community. Maya was a constant presence, a small ray of sunshine in the bustling worksite. She helped paint a colorful mural on one of the library walls, her small handprints a permanent part of the building's new identity. She and Arthur developed a special bond. He would read to her in the afternoons, his deep voice bringing stories to life, and she would make him laugh with her imaginative games and endless questions. One afternoon, as they were installing the last of the light fixtures, Arthur turned to Liam, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what comes next after this project is finished." Liam paused his work, a flicker of anxiety in his chest. He hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead. "I'm not sure," he said honestly. Arthur smiled. "I have an idea," he said. "I'm starting a foundation, dedicated to community development. Projects like this one. And I need someone to run it, someone with hands-on experience and a deep understanding of what communities really need. I need you, Liam." Liam was stunned. "Me run a foundation? I'm a carpenter." "Arthur, you're more than that," Arthur said, his voice firm. "You're a leader, a problem solver, and you have a heart for people. You're the perfect person for the job." The offer was a life-altering opportunity, a chance to not only provide a stable future for Maya, but to make a real difference in the world. Liam looked at the beautiful building around him, a symbol of his own second chance. He knew he couldn't turn it down. This was the culmination of everything they had built together. Partnership forged in trust and a shared vision for a better world. "I'd be honored," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion, and as they shook hands in the warm glow of the newly installed lights, he knew that he had finally found his true calling a place where he could build more than just buildings, he could build hope. The grand opening of the Vance Morgan Community Center was a day of celebration. For the entire city, the sun shone brightly on the newly renovated building, its brick facade gleaming and its large windows sparkling. The street was closed off for a block party, and the air was filled with the sound of music, laughter, and the smell of barbecue. Hundreds of people milled about their faces, filled with awe and gratitude as they explored the new space. Inside the center was a hive of activity. Kids were reading in the library, Nook teenagers were playing music on the small stage, and adults were signing up for classes in the workshop. Liam stood on the steps of the building watching the scene unfold, a deep sense of pride and accomplishment swelling in his chest. He wore a new suit, a gift from Arthur, but he still felt more comfortable in his work boots. Maya stood beside him, holding his hand, her eyes shining with excitement. She was wearing a new dress, and her hair was tied back with a ribbon. She looked up at him and beamed, "You did it, Daddy. You built a castle for everyone." Liam smiled down at her. "We did it, sweetheart. We did it together." Arthur came up behind them and put a hand on Liam's shoulder. He looked out at the crowd, his expression a mixture of pride and humility. "My father would have loved this," he said, his voice soft. "He always believed in the power of community." A local news crew approached them. "There." Camera rolling. "Mr. Vance, a few words about this incredible project," the reporter asked. Arthur smiled and turned to the camera. "I'd be happy to, but first I want to introduce you to my partner and the real hero of this story, Liam Morgan." He gestured to Liam, who was taken aback by the sudden attention. Arthur continued, "This center wasn't built with money. It was built with heart, with skill, and with the unwavering dedication of a man who understands that the true foundation of any community is its people. Liam is the embodiment of that spirit, and I am honored to be his partner." The crowd erupted in applause, and as Liam stood in the spotlight, his face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. He knew that his life had come full circle. He was no longer a man defined by his failures, but by his ability to rebuild, to create, and to inspire. He had found more than just a job. He had found a purpose, a community, and a friend who had seen the best in there to him, even when he couldn't see it in himself. And as he looked out at the sea of smiling faces, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new and beautiful chapter in his life, a chapter filled with hope, possibility, and the enduring power of a second chance. After the speeches were done, and the news crews had packed up, the block party continued well into the evening. String lights twinkled overhead, casting a magical glow on the celebrating crowd. Liam and Arthur stood on the rooftop terrace of the community center, looking down at the joyful chaos below. The city skyline glittered in the distance, a stark contrast to the small, intimate celebration happening on their street. "It's a good day," Liam said, taking a sip of the sparkling cider Arthur had handed him. "It's a great day." Arthur corrected a genuine smile on his face. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Maya dance with a group of other kids, her laughter carrying up to them on the warm evening breeze. "She's happy," Arthur said quietly. "Happier than I've ever seen her," Liam replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave her that, Arthur. You gave us both a life I never thought we'd have again." "You built it, Liam," Arthur said, turning to face him. "I just opened the door. You were the one who had the courage to walk through it." He paused. Then his expression grew more serious. "There's one more thing I want to talk to you about." Liam's brow furrowed. "What's that?" "The foundation," Arthur said. "It's officially launching next month, and the board is in place. But there's a missing piece." He took a deep breath. "I've been the face of Vance Capital for years, a symbol of wealth and corporate power, but that's not who I want to be anymore. I want the foundation to represent something different, something more human. I want you to be the face of it." "Liam, not me." Liam was stunned. "Me? But I'm nobody. You're everybody, Arthur countered his voice. Passionate. You're the man who lost everything and never lost his integrity. You're the father who would do anything for his child. You're the craftsman who builds with his hands and his heart. You are the story. We need to tell people. We'll trust you, Liam, because you're real. The offer was overwhelming, audacious, and utterly terrifying. Liam had spent his life avoiding the spotlight, preferring the quiet satisfaction of his work. But he also knew that Arthur was right. This was an opportunity to amplify their message, to inspire others who were struggling, to show them that a second chance was possible. I don't know if I can do that, Arthur, he said honestly. I'm not a public speaker. You don't have to be, Arthur said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Just be yourself. Tell your story, and the rest will follow. Liam looked out at the city, at the endless sea of lights and possibilities. He thought about the cold, lonely night in the bus station and how far he had come. Since then, he had been given a gift, a chance to not only rebuild his own life, but to help others do the same. He couldn't turn his back on that. He met Arthur's gaze, his decision made. Okay, he said, his voice steady. I'll do it. And in that moment, under the stars, a new partnership was forged. One that would build more than just community centers. It would build a legacy of hope and transformation for years to come. The years that followed were a testament to their shared vision. The Vance Morgan Foundation became a powerful force for good funding projects across the country that revitalized struggling communities and provided opportunities for those who needed them most. Liam traveled extensively, not as a corporate executive, but as a storyteller. He shared his own journey of loss and redemption, inspiring others with his honesty and his unwavering belief in the power of a second chance. He became a reluctant but effective public figure, his quiet strength and genuine humility resonating with people from all walks of life. Arthur remained behind the scenes, the silent partner who provided the resources and the strategic guidance. He had found his own form of redemption in a quieter, more fulfilling life, away from the relentless glare of the corporate world. He and Liam remained the closest of friends, their bond forged in the crucible of their shared experience. Maya grew into a bright, compassionate young woman, her childhood shaped by the values of her father and her honorary uncle. She spent her summers volunteering at the community center, tutoring younger kids, and helping to organize events. She was a living embodiment of the Foundation's mission, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and opportunity. One sunny afternoon, Liam found himself back at the original community center, the place where it all began. It was thriving, a vibrant hub of activity and a beloved institution in the city. He walked through the halls, his hand grazing the smooth oak banister he had so carefully restored. He saw his own story reflected in the faces of the pleasant people. There, the single mother, learning a new skill in the workshop, the teenager finding his voice on the small stage, the elderly man reading quietly in the library. He went up to the rooftop terrace, the place where he and Arthur had made their pact so many years ago. The city skyline stretched out before him, a glittering panorama of glass and steel, but his gaze was drawn to the small brick building across the square. The bus station. It was still there, a quiet monument to a life he had left behind. He thought about the desperate man he had been that night, huddled in the cold with his daughter and a handful of dollars to his name. He thought about the kind stranger who had offered him a key and a chance to start over. He realized then that his story wasn't just about a second chance, it was about the power of human connection. The simple, profound truth that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the belief that they are seen, that they matter, and that they are not alone. He smiled, a deep, contented smile that reached the very core of his being. He had built more than he had ever dreamed possible. Not just buildings, but lives. Not just a foundation, but a family. And he knew that the best was yet to come.